We're going to start with just setting out what the idea of cool is according to us. And Amit here has a whole list of...
I have a whole bunch of adjectives that I think that, when you think of cool, you associate, with the term. And like you said, these things cut across like caste and class and everything because like it's a sort of universal elements of cool. Cool is independent, indigenous, it's authentic, it's not mainstream, it's not always commercially successful, something that we've learned. It's unique, it's taking risks, it's doing things that people don't do or have never been done before. It's not trendy. Cool, I would say, is anti-fashion. It's, but what's great about cool, the genuine cool, is that it's timeless and that it sort of leaves a legacy and it actually cultivates and sort of, create something for the future. So what's cool yesterday doesn't always stay cool tomorrow, but if it's genuinely cool, you will sort of see it emerge over time. So these are some of the things that, we think are cool. And then I think we'll talk about the different sort of areas that we cover personally. I sort of cover the music scene, a lot.
Yeah,
Puva looks
I
at
do
food. And Pranati looks at the film and theatre worlds and, things that she's observed there. So we'll sort of take it from there. What I've found is that one of that Gladwell quote talked about how you can't create cool, you can only observe it. But you do find that people kind of try and attempt to sort of create an aura of coolness. And something that I've noticed recently, especially in Bombay's culture scene, is one of the ways to do this is to sort of control access, which would mean you'd either say that this is a secret event, and only, or this is a limited edition thing, or this is a guest list only. And so you have to sort of figure out a way for you to get there, and then somehow that becomes exciting for people, and yeah, I mean,
I think a lot of events are actually, I mean, you see that the kind of, at least my friends list, the events that they're going to on Facebook, now that Facebook lets you see everything, are the ones that say, oh, it's a secret gig on a rooftop or something. And I'm like, but what is it? Has anybody asked this question? Is anybody trying to get to the bottom of what is it? But no, it's a secret gig and you just want to be there, so.
Yeah. But then again, so that's creating cool. But is it actually cool? I guess you have to go there and find out. But
but like, why don't you tell us about the music scene, which is something that you've covered for years and years, and which has sort of changed so much in the last several years actually. What have you noticed? What's enduring and what's cool about the music scene? Well, I mean, this whole idea of indie, for example, and we're seeing a lot more indie music, indie musicians, indie labels. Of course, most of them aren't commercially successful, but the fact is that they are there and they're doing things.
Yeah, and when you mentioned indie labels now, for instance, as the music industry has changed, for instance, there's no longer actually music labels are kind of outdated, they're obsolete. So but there are indie labels in the last year, I think last 3 or 4 years, about almost a dozen indie labels have been formed, and these are all been formed by musicians themselves. And these are musicians, they're not looking at this as a commercial enterprise, they're looking at this as sort of forming collectives and bringing together like-minded individuals who sort of create the same kind of music, who can find strength in numbers. So that's kind of so it's really...
people are doing this out of their living rooms, right?
They're doing it out of the living rooms. They don't have a company. It's not a record company, but this is basically, I can give you an example. There's a guy called Frame by Frame, aka Nikhil Kaul. He's in Delhi and
This is a DJ,
This is a DJ, electronic producer. So his record label essentially just works with, and he's formed this with another guy called Soul Space, who's Vishnu PS from Bangalore. And they sort of bring together musicians, and they call it LIT. They bring together musicians like themselves, and they organize gigs. So it's all done through Facebook and social media. And these might be ticketed events or not. And
I mean, do they reach out to people? So do they have an audience?
They have their own audience. So what they do is they build. So the people who work with them. So say they know 6 upcoming producers. So they'll get them together. They'll all do a gig together. They've started something that they call a beat jam, where they literally get you have about jams with rock and roll musicians who use guitars and drums and things. These are electronic music producers who'll come together and literally just sort of do a beat jam where they'll produce beats and sort of merge them together. So So it's that kind of thing. And what's interesting is also is that, so Nikhil himself is a pretty popular, a producer, and he has a booking agent, somebody who helps him find gigs. And, how booking agents work is that they take a percentage of your concerts. But interestingly, his booking agent, these guys called Mixtape, don't take a cut when he's doing a lit gig, because they know it's not like a commercial, commercially oriented. That's
Are they not concerned with numbers in that case? Which also sort of, if I can tie this up with Grime Riot Disco, like it started in like really grungy venues, and
So
now
Grime
it's sort
Riot
of,
Disco, do you want to just explain it?
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a monthly series of dance gigs.
Yeah.
And Amit can tell you more about
you've
it.
been to many yourself.
But it's one place you can actually dance, and I think the music range is quite interesting.
So yeah, I think what Grime Riot Disco was, the idea was to start. It was started by this bunch of like artists and like designers and musicians who got together and decided that, hey, there's no place to just go out dancing. If you want to go dancing, you have to go to like a really fancy nightclub.
Or a Bollywood.
And there are
Nightclubs
barely
that
any
play a lot of
nightclubs in
Bollywood.
Bombay in any
commercial,
case.
a super
Yeah.
commercial venue. I mean, you have plenty of electronic music gigs, but those are more of listening experience. You have somebody who's actually, performing. But if you just want to go out and dance, your only options are going to like this really like a 5-star hotel that has a huge nightclub, pay like an immense entry fee. So it says almost like, let's take back dancing and the idea of it to make it back to what it was originally, of having fun. But what Grime Riot Disco, that was the really cool thing about it. And how they started it was that to ensure some sort of, making sure that people don't get the wrong idea, and that it's not like your regular commercial Bollywood night. It's kind of celebrating music that you kind of like. And some of it is also a bit of old school, celebrating hip hop from back in the day, the kind of music that they like. And a lot of people, I guess, who come to their gigs like. So they had it, you had to sign up through their Facebook page. You couldn't actually just go and attend. You had to register on the Facebook page. So you obviously you had to discover what this Facebook page was somehow. Some friend would eventually send it to you. Then people got to know about it. We would list it, for instance, and we still list it. But now what's happened is that, and they would have it at like these really shady venues, not shady in the sense like clubs that you wouldn't otherwise go to. Random places like H2O in Bandra, which doesn't really have anything else. What's happened over the years is they figured out that now they built this audience, and now they have it. Now it's a regular gig. It's a regular gig night at Antisocial. You pay an entry fee. Anybody can go. But what's happened is I think that they've established an audience wherein only the people who really want to come for it will go for it, because they know what a Grime Riot Disco night is. They know that, okay, I'm not going to get my Bollywood there. I'm not going to get stuff that I really am not interested in. So. Yeah. So that's sort of an idea of cultivating cool. And, talking about what's cool right now in the Indian indie scene and some of the attributes that we mentioned, like the coolest act right now, and that I have heard everybody talking about, are two guys, Nazi and Divine, who are these rappers. And they have just emerged from the scene. They're from Bombay, and their music sort of celebrates the fact that they're from here. They're from, Nazi's from Kurla, and Divine is from Andheri. And they rap in Hindi and English. Well, Nazi raps in Hindi, Divine raps in English and Hindi, and their music, it sort of is really, it's from Bombay. It's not like a rapper trying to be like, Eminem or Jay-Z. And you can tell
and they rap about Bombay issues, which is what is interesting
and they talk
about them.
their neighborhood. And, Nazi is sort of like grew up in Kurla, where he was surrounded by, basically, he very well could have sort of fallen into a lifestyle where he could have sort of, become like a petty criminal. But then it's sort of like this cliched story where hip hop saved him. But when you actually think about it, how he sort of discovered hip hop was through the most commercial fashion. I think it was in may have been some Ganpati procession or something, where he heard a Sean Paul song.
I thought Akon maybe.
Sean Paul. And
Sean
that's how
Paul
he
is
discovered his music, and he fell in love with it.
But hip hop in general now is pretty, I think it's always been cool. I'm a big fan of hip hop, but now I think in Bombay especially, I just suddenly feel like it has this presence.
We've had hip hop for about a decade in the city. I mean, more than that.
We've had Baba Sehgal
we've had Baba
and
Sehgal,
Apache Indian.
Who, I mean, so Baba Sehgal, I don't think was ever considered cool. I mean, a certain section now considers him like, because of the nostalgia involved, he's been getting gigs and stuff like that. But when you talk about like authenticity and, the stuff that what's really cool about it. I think is that something that you find. But do you guys find that, like, for in the food world, for example, do these attributes do they apply here?
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap, I would say. Like, things you said like authenticity, novelty.
Taking risk, I think, is the most.
It is, but I'll come to the risk bit later, because in food, like, innovation is great, but innovation that also, it has to toe the line somewhere. For example, just related to this, if you talk about modern Indian food, like, Indian food is suddenly back in the conversation, which is great. But, and there are some restaurants doing great modern Indian food. There's Indian Accent. In Bombay, there's Masala Library, there's Zia, there's places like Monkey Bar and the Bombay Canteen. Excellent Indian food, except that there are other restaurants that are sort of have taken on this a similar way of cooking, but they're taking their experiments too far. So you're getting
just not
fusion
using any
dishes.
discretion, right?
Yeah, fusion that is just does not make any sense, and it's just it borders on the ridiculous.
So they.
Let's give people some examples.
I don't know, like.
Okay, but let's talk about what's cool, because I think that just to focus on the guys that are doing it right, the guys like Indian Accent and the Bombay Canteen, what they're doing is also celebrating local and regional ingredients.
Exactly.
And
So
bringing back, like you said, I think bringing back what your parents or grandparents cooked and presenting it in a modern...
I think currently eating local is cool, because there is a lot that is available now. Seasonality is in focus. Like, a lot of menus say we serve fresh food. Don't say that. But if you're saying that I'm serving something that's in season, that's something that's grown here, that is something that's admirable. That's something that's, hey, you're making me notice. There are also a lot of farmers who are growing exotic produce here. So, your your red cabbage, your kale or whatever, use that instead of importing. Like, the seasonality versus what is like quinoa and your kales that was being imported, that's a fad. That I don't think that necessarily that's cool. But if you're using things
some
like
people think like kale and quinoa are cool. But I think the distinction is is it hipster or is it cool, right?
Okay, the word hipster also is so contentious, but I think that, what you said, something that can endure. I feel like if we keep employing local ingredients, then it's not a sort of a limited resource. It's always going to be available to us.
And it's also the idea of sustainability that I think now a lot of restaurants are trying to promote. I mean, the whole idea of eating food that's grown in a farm that's not very far away, as opposed to importing food from, another country. It's just a lot more sustainable, and finally people are cottoning onto this idea.
Restaurants that are serving, like, say, European or American food, say the table, pantry, not necessarily just the Indian ones, like the Bombay Canteen is doing this, but they're employing local ingredients in other cuisines, and I think that's excellent. That's something, and that will continue. If you're, and like they have their own little farmlands. They are employing local farmers directly, so there are no middlemen. You're not going to a Vashi food market. You're actually growing your own produce, and I think that's excellent. Or a Vrindavan Farms that's been supplying mangoes and teas and herbs and vegetables every week to regular people and to restaurants.
And you've also written about a bunch of cheesemakers who've been sort of, making French-style cheeses in their basements.
Yeah, so I think that's where it comes to novelty and innovation. I think food is cool in the moment. Like, food is really having its time, which is funny because food is just, it's always there, right? But, which is great for me because it validates what I do as a writer. If food wasn't cool, I don't know how many people would be reading what we do as writers, or everybody wants to comment on food or wants to be part of creating it. And when it comes to the creation, the innovation, I think a lot of that is happening on the home front now, which is really exciting. Again, that's part of the local movement, right? So, like Pratik, the Sporika Fromagerie, these two boys who make like French cheeses like Camembert and Brie and Robbiola, which I think is Italian, they're doing all of this in a really tiny, it's like a 500 square feet basement. They've sort of kitted it out themselves. in addition to cheesemakers, there are the brewers. So what Gateway Brewing Company is a fantastic example of what is cool. And I'll tell you why it's cool. Even though now they've got their spread is so immense right now, it's literally started in one of their homes. They were home brewers. They used to collect people like bar owners who had similar passions. They got them home, and they just started like brewing as a hobby. And then these bar guys, the bar owners, for example, Woodside, Pankal from Woodside, who will be speaking later, people like them in Bonobo, they took a chance on these guys and they said, okay, this is quality beer. Let's try and put it up. They started selling the beer. Now these beers are not just in bars, they're also in restaurants. And what's great about GBC is that they've kept up the innovation. So there are new flavors pretty often. And they also are doing collaborations. So they've created a scene. You know, it's not just, okay, I'm going to make my beer in a corner. It's not in isolation. Now, Bombay craft beers, there is a scene of craft beers because of these guys. They initiated it, while the rest of India already had it. But because of this small home movement, it's become...
In fact, there's a craft beer festival today in Andheri.
It's going on, yeah, today
so
and
after
tomorrow.
this event,
Yeah,
you guys
go
are
there.
heading that
It's
side.
at-
You should go to
it's at
Brewbot.
which is
and-
one of the microbreweries, and Dulali,
Yeah.
or, so Ketu is talking here. So
You
they're
know,
also-
so that's, in terms of creating a scene, I think that what's cool is if the effort is a concerted effort. For example, with the home chefs, things like what Munaf is doing, what Gitika Saikia is doing. There's a new company called Meraki Project that's just sort of growing. Again, they do a lot of Khasi and Kumaoni food. It's not just spotlighting regional food. It's about doing it consistently and doing it over a period of time. So it's not like they did it for 6 months, they got all the media attention and they quit. No, that's not cool. What's cool is like you're at it, you're trying different ways to promote the same thing. So it stays in people's consciousness. And now regional food has become a thing. It's slowly seeping into restaurants. So I think that we need to sort of doff our hats to home chefs for bringing that. I met a bunch of kids who are interested in making kombucha, you know, like he's a brewer who's also making his own kombucha, and I think that's exciting. For example, the other side of this is the cold pressed. That's a trend. That's a fad. I feel like
because we've been having cold pressed juice for years.
we have
Sugarcane
it's
juice
ganna.
from the street
Ganna is cold pressed,
is
you
cold
know.
pressed.
So if you told me that I'm gonna, if you used ganna as an example of this is why we're getting into the cold press, I would think that is cool. But you're riding on this whole American cold press wave. You're not actually doing anything that's too authentic. I'm not discounting what they're doing. I'm just saying like things like cold press, froyo, you know, eating like quinoa, organic, all these things, these are fads. These will fade, you know. And it's our job to identify, I think, which is like, it's a challenge even for us to identify what is cool and what is a fad. And we have to try and be skeptical about everything new that comes in. So while novelty is cool, it's not necessary that it's going to be the next cool thing.
Yeah.
You know?
And you know, like you said, you've seen like people latch on to what some of these guys have been doing and really sort of corrupt it and then make it uncool.
Yeah.
Like, you know, doing really in matching ingredients that don't belong with each other. Yeah.
Yeah,
like, you know, butter chicken with Hakka noodles, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, in fact, we've written about this. Our food columnist Roshni Bajaj Sangvi.
Who's going to be moderating,
She's
I think, the
moderating
next
a panel later, and
later
she did
lunch.
it was a fantastic rant to read about how you're really messing with Indian food and like, you know, pizza on a dhokla or in a hanvo or inside pani puri. I mean, who wants to eat pani puri pizza? You know, like what is that?
But you know,
even?
some of those restaurants are doing pretty well, and I think this is where you talk about cool and how it's such a fluid thing, where cool and popularity are not necessarily synonymous. I mean, you have something that's hugely popular, but it's not cool, right?
Yeah.
And it's also very different for, I think, for the food scene and the culture scene, because in the food scene, like you said, it's something that everybody eats. Everybody sort of wants to have an opinion about food, but it's slightly difficult for the cultural scene, wherein you're constantly, you know, you're almost fighting a lone battle where you're trying to stage events that, you know, because it's not a commercially necessarily, because you have the Bollywood gigs, you have like, you know, the really, you know, the other stuff. You have the film world. When you talk about culture, a lot of people look at culture as entertainment and they're looking at it as a choice between things. But there is an audience, and I think that's what happened in this city over the last decade, where you've been noticing that there are niche audiences for a lot of different cultural activities. And Pranati, you've covered a lot of these, and you've been to recently a fair number of like new spaces that are sort of trying to do, different kinds of events.
That's right. So I went recently to this place called R&R in Mankhurd, and it's really more of a community space. It's meant for people who live in Lalubhai compound in Mankhurd, and Lalubhai compound, it's one of the, it's a very sort of dystopic SRA project. And so this community space, it's for the kids over there, and they also have a lot of arts events, and it's really more for the community and less a place for people to go, because really, who's going to trek all the way to Mankhurd? And what's interesting is that they're actually sort of engaging with the community of people who could really sort of use, who really need, for whom art is a relief. So that's one really interesting space that I saw recently.
When you're speaking of R&R, what's really commendable about it is that it's been started by a bunch of artists, right?
It is. It's been started by a bunch of artists and art curators and also architects. So it's in this little shed.
So they've actually gone to Mankhurd and they've decided that, we're going to create something and bring art to a place that people didn't have access to
right.
it. And
so,
would it be far removed from it? Just talking about having a gallery in a corporate park is such a big thing. These are people who have never only going to come to a corporate park, right? They're just
So for example, so it was really interesting to see, the photographs of Ketki Sheth in this place, and kids curiously looking at these photographs. And I suppose you can be skeptical and say, really, what do they need this? Is this something that they really need? These are guys who are fighting for survival at one level, but it's just a lovely space that they've created, and it's a place that they can take a break. Kids could do their homework over there.
And they've got coloring books that have been made from
by
artworks.
Shilpa Gupta.
Yeah,
Shilpa Gupta has made a coloring book, and these little kids color in a Shilpa Gupta coloring book, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. I'd buy that.
Yeah. And the other space is Matterden. Matterden has been around for a couple of years. It was started by this guy called Pranav Ashar, who ran a film club, and then he took over Deepak Cinema, and they show classic films. So they'll show you Hitchcock films or all kinds
even
of
the new ones. Actually, I saw Jungle Book there.
Right. So
I saw In the Mood for Love.
I suppose that's sort of to draw people, because usually the theater is empty.
Pro tip for people: if you don't get tickets to any of these big, huge movies,
They're
go to
playing
Deepak,
at
go
will
to
get
Matterden. You will likely get a ticket.
It's a fantastic.
So, for example,
theater.
right now they're showing
It's a
Jason
nicer
Bourne.
experience than a multiplex.
It's a great, and it's so cheap. I
It's
love
very
that.
cheap.
Cool does not have to be something that's really expensive. And
No,
I
but
think even
it's-
in food.
And it's just
you
great
know?
that you have that there is a place in the city where you can watch classic cinema.
Yeah.
Like you can watch,
And
Wong Kar-wai.
Liberty is actually also now
Right,
doing
so the
something
arts
similar.
organization Oceans, they have something called Oceanama at Liberty. They've taken over Liberty Cinema, and they do these screenings of classic
Classics
Western
and also movies
also
and fairly
Indian.
recent films that haven't got cinematic releases because they're so niche. Like I saw The Lobster there, which was only screened at like Mami.
Right.
And then, and if you don't like downloading movies and watching them on your laptop and you really want to see a movie on the big screen, this is a great place to go because they are actually showing you fairly recent movies.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's also the Sitara Studio,
Yeah,
which
so there's a
you've
bunch
been
of
to.
spaces like, Sitara, where they've done a whole bunch of things. They've done gigs there, they've done theater performances. Sitara was an old TV studio that I think used to have a lot of, and now these sort of the next generation has taken it over. And then you've got places, like the Hive and the Cuckoo Club, and this is going to be a subject of a panel later on about how these new places. And if I look at the most interesting gigs that I've been to in the last 6 months, they've all been in sort of innovative spaces. There is, I went for this gig, this Rajasthani Qawwali performance at the Great Eastern Home, which is basically a furniture store in Baikala, but it sort of overlooks this pond, so it was a fantastic setting. And, it's basically an empty room, a large room, but it was a pretty amazing performances because, if I were to see that in like, say, I don't know, like a slightly different environment. It would not have the same level of engagement because they had the space to put down gaddas. You could watch it. It was really sort of lent. It was kind of different and exciting. Then I went for a Sufi performance at this place called the Mumbai Assembly, which has been started by this girl who used to work with the British Council, and it's in this hall, the Kannada Catholic Association Hall near Lilavati. And like the building, you would like never imagine there was something, like that is happening there. But you go there, and again, it's a small room, but they've set it up, and I think that so what you have what's happening right now is people really sort of figuring out that hey, we know there's an audience for this. Yeah, we need to figure out how to match the audience and the performance and the creators of this content, but it can happen. And in fact, I just met with somebody the other day who is starting something which is actually going to bring these people together. They're going to start an app where if you're a venue, you can sign up to this app and say, hey, I'm interested in hosting these performances. And if you're a performer, you can say, I'm interested in like staging performances and bringing these people together to this app.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Just on this point, as a consumer, as a reader or whatever, I think that cool to me is like if there's like an element of discovery, which is with these venues or a new performance that you've seen. But Pranthi, you were mentioning that in the performance space, it's not as exciting as maybe the movie space is something we were discussing the other day.
That's right. No, I used to cover theatre for Time Out, and I don't watch as many plays as I used to, but I've noticed that, the theatre scene, the plays that have been coming out, Hindi, English, Gujarati, Marathi, all of them are fairly inward looking, as opposed to what they were in the 70s and 80s when, theatre had its heyday in Bombay, when it was political, when it was engaging with issues. And I find this is happening with indie cinema. Again, I don't know, this is sort of really, I don't think they make any money. Like, even a film like Caught, for example, which I think is perhaps the best Indian film to have emerged in the last, I don't know how many years. I think a lot of indie filmmakers, they're ballsy, they're taking up political issues. Caught, for example, sort of takes on the Nakshal issue, people being wrongly incarcerated for having Nakshal sympathies. Masan, again, it deals with the Dalit issue, it deals with
moral
policing, and sort of told, and both these films experiment with style. Caught particularly, it's very slow moving, it's very reminiscent of Chinese and Taiwanese cinema. So someone who's not used to watching world cinema might sort of, wonder what they're seeing.
What about something like an Urta Punjab? Is that cool?
Well, Urta Punjab, I don't know. Well, it tackles an issue. It tackles, drugs, the issue of drugs in Punjab. But it's not a very good film.
I think that what's, with something like film, you have to look at the end result may not necessarily be, but what's ballsy about it and what's cool about it is the fact that they're making a movie about,
yeah, but this is open to debate.
And
I'm not sure this is always
No, but they're putting
enough.
in crores of money because the difference is that unlike a food enterprise or a cultural enterprise, the amount of funds that you require to stage something like that is far less. And when you're looking at cinema, unlike a movie like Caught, which may have been done at a small budget, a movie like Urta Punjab, which is kind of somewhere between the mid space between indie and mainstream, where you're getting big Bollywood stars to come and act in this, you are spending crores of money in it, and you're doing it on a subject that is nobody else has has actually had the balls to write.
True, but then you can contrast something like that with a film like Sairat. The Marathi film, which again I think was not made on a big budget, but it's become one of the biggest grossing.
I think
Marathi
it's the highest
films.
grossing Marathi film
Exactly,
of all time.
and sort of that deals with the issue of caste. It's an example of a mainstream film that's actually hard hitting. So I think you can make a pretty hard hitting film and a mainstream film. It's not easy, but it's possible, as Sairat has shown.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things we think are cool about what's going on in Bombay in the culture and food scenes. I hope we've sort of
And
there's loads more we could.
And I think the debate for later, maybe when all the discussion winds down.
As we were saying, these ideas are fluid. They're open to debate.
And it is something that's that has become successful, has become relatively mass? Does that stop being cool?
Yeah,
I think that's a question that we're
that's a
also
question, and that's something
we
that I
need to
can sort
answer.
of talk about through an example. And Shreyas, who's here, can, I don't think he's here right now, but like, for instance, the Weekender Festival, I don't know how many of you have heard of it or been to it. It's like the largest indie music festival in the country. Now, I don't know, amongst a certain set of people, the Weekender Festival may no longer be considered cool. And one of the reasons for this is that when it started, it was just a very sort of, it had only indie musicians. It was limited to a few thousand, I think they had like
I mean, we've
3,000-4,000
seen it
people
grow.
grow. Like we went for the
Yeah.
first year, there was like 1,500 people. The next year, there was like 3,000 people. The year after that, there was 9,000 people. And last year, I think there were like some 25,000 people.
Yeah.
Of course, last year they had A.R. Rahman. And
Who is as mainstream?
who's as
it
mainstream as
gets.
you can go. But this year they've gone one step further and they've got Farhan Akhtar. So that's like sort of really turning a corner. And I think for a lot of people that's no longer cool. But on the other hand, when you look at it, they're also getting Steven Wilson, who's this legendary progressive rock musician, from Porcupine Tree. And I don't think any other Indian music festival could afford to bring, apart from Mood Eye and the guys at IIT who obviously have,
Flush.
figured out how to get lakhs and lakhs of money. But so these guys, nobody else is going to get you Steven Wilson
So
or
the
Anushka
point is,
Shankar. The point
the
is that-
idea is that because it's so big, they
Yeah,
can afford to get
so-
people like Steven Wilson.
But the flip side is that they also maybe have to get like a Farhan Akhtar on the bill to sort of balance out and make sure that they get those, because they can get, okay, maybe I know I can get 5,000 people for Steven Wilson, but I can get 10,000 people for Farhan. So it's that sort of balance and fluidity of what's cool. On the other hand, there's something called the Zero Festival in Arunachal Pradesh, in this place called Zero Valley, which is really cool, and everybody thinks it's cool but it's far away, and you have
Which
to
is probably
it
what
takes
adds to its
25. Yeah, the idea of that limited
That
access.
obscure,
It takes
you know.
24 hours. We are from Bombay. It takes literally, you have to fly to Guwahati. You have to then take an overnight train.
to Narlagun.
And then you have to take a drive, a very precarious drive that can take you anywhere between 4 and 10 hours.
Yeah.
But when you get there, it's like you're in heaven. You're literally, because the landscape, is just so beautiful. It's so something that you've never seen before. And the music actually doesn't really matter so much, because if you look at the actual programming, the Zero programming is not very exciting. It's like bands you've seen before, but it's just seeing them in that setting that's incredible.
Yeah.
And but that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the coolest festival right now. I
Again,
think that
discovery,
people-
right?
yeah,
You're
yeah.
discovering that Zero exists.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
there's
wow,
this-
what a
wow,
place.
I mean, the music just sounds better, in a place like this. So yeah, so I think these are questions, these are debates, and you'll hear this throughout the day in different panels about how the idea of cool really varies, and really what is cool. It's so kind of, it's sort
It
of.
shouldn't be taken seriously.
Yeah, I
like,
don't think
don't
that-
get bogged down with, oh, we gotta try and be cool. If you try,
because
it just
trying
stops.
to be cool is just
Yeah.
not cool.
It's not cool. And I don't think that's a sort of term that even we sort of.
Yeah, and I don't think, the
It's-
one
it's
thing
been
that I've
ascribed
known
to us, but
that
we've not, like-
anybody who calls themselves cool is not cool. So on that note, I think we'll move on to the next panel.